Why is music like that now? Has anyone else noticed that it all just sounds so performative, weird, almost uncanny? Like modern music is so generic it feels like a parody of itself? We all know nostalgia is on the rise and that Gen Z craves the pop icons of the 2000s and 2010s, but why does it seem like nearly every new artist since then feels so obviously, blatantly manufactured and artificial? Artists like Benson, Boone, Sabrina Carpenter, Addison all just sound and look so generic and manufactured, like they were 3D printed from ChatGPT. It leads people to wonder, what went wrong since the 2010s? Why does popular culture suddenly feel so foreign and out of touch? Well, what if I told you it's not the music that has changed, but you? We are witnessing in real time the death of the monoculture, or a singular shared popular culture, and a new divide between younger generations who are siloed into algorithmic niches and older generations who still consume more traditional forms of media and take part in that outdated monoculture. What if I told you someone like Benson Boone would have probably been universally loved just 10 years ago, but due to negativity-driven algorithms and whatever is considered mainstream being hated, he's relentlessly torn apart, at times for no real reason other than the fact that he represents something known as Coworker music, or a cringy, overplayed, generic genre of music. But don't let my observation fool you. I'm not some absolute defender of modern music because it also isn't that simple. There definitely is truth in the fact that music is becoming more artificial and manufactured due to a massive consolidation of wealth and unfathomably powerful algorithms that tell those in power what is trending and what aesthetics and sounds are most likely to sell, even if that means performative personas or manufactured industry plans. In other words, it's not just the death of the monoculture, but also that we are living through the collapse of risk-taking and creativity in the name of profit thanks to monopolies and algorithms. In this video, I want to touch on this nuanced topic from coworker music, the death of the monoculture, neurodivergence and art, to neoliberal capitalism and how it promotes safe, reliable routes to profit at the expense of creativity, which is always born from risk-taking, to AI and godlike algorithms, and how we are single-handedly witnessing the disillusion of individuality, creativity, and eventually free will itself as we accelerate toward an AI-based society where we unquestionably put all our faith into super powerful algorithms and what they tell us to do.
Addison Rae feels algorithmic.
Why does music suck now?
Quote, as the pace of AI progress accelerates, superintelligence is coming into sight.
Who's going to be in charge, machines or men?
Life itself is only a vision, a dream. Nothing exists save empty space and you.
About a month ago, Benson Boone posted a video on TikTok asking people why they hate him so much so he could try and improve. He received many different replies, with some saying he seems too inauthentic, too performative, too corporate, or even that they don't really know why they don't like him, just that they do. One response I saw many people touch on though that I found interesting was the specific type of music Benson Boone makes.
We are young.
You know, that millennial core, gung-ho, worship song sounding, overly safe music you'd hear in a grocery store or a car commercial.
Find the soul of BMW in those who drive it.
This specific type of music has been talked about a lot lately on TikTok, with many now labeling it as coworker music. Coworker music is defined by Urban Dictionary as referring to mainstream, widely popular music that is inoffensive, commercial, and considered overplayed. It's an evolution of the term MPC music, describing tracks that are generic and safe. This type of music is common in workplace settings because it avoids strong reactions, fitting into a background role where it's heard but not deeply appreciated. In other words, it's that music that you would typically never hear until you are forced to by your coworkers. It's that incredibly generic, pop-like, so safe and digestible it's uncanny and cringy type of music. But why is coworker culture so weird, and why does the term coworker music feel so oddly specific but perfectly accurate? Well, it has to do with the coworker experience in general. A job, specifically if it's an entry-level, no experience needed job like retail or fast food, tends to bring the most random groups of people together and creates those surreal social dynamics where you have a 20-something-year-old befriending someone born before World War II. It can feel so strange because being coworkers has a sort of equalizing effect that wouldn't or couldn't exist anywhere else. Like, think about how you would typically interact with someone old enough to be your grandparent. You sort of tone down your actual personality and tend to watch what you say out of respect. But when you're coworkers, suddenly you're talking about how wasted you got the other night and relationship drama with someone who was your age during the civil rights movement. It's this weird social dynamic that can literally only exist in a coworker-like setting. But why does it seem like almost every coworker we have has these weird NPC-like opinions or tastes in music? Well, I think another big part of it has to do with neurodivergence and how most people are neurotypical. And when you put the two together, it can create almost like a psychological culture shock. Like you truly didn't know that anyone enjoyed something like Benson, Boone, Sabrina Carpenter, or Jelly Roll, but that you now understand where the demand for that type of music is coming from. On this point, and like I briefly touched on in my previous two Ethel Cain videos, I think it can be argued that some of the best art, not just today, but in all of history, comes from those who are neurodivergent because good art is inherently subversive. Good art takes whatever is accepted, mainstream, or normalized and flips it on its head by innovating and persistently moving the cultural bar forward. This is also why some argue there is no real conservative art, because conservatism doesn't stand for anything except the status quo. It doesn't challenge norms or innovate culture, it just stagnates in others. Those with neurodivergence already experience the world in very unconventional ways, which tends to make their art naturally very unique and interesting, and those who are neurotypical tend to be more conformist or less able to knock down mainstream barriers through creative innovation, which makes them perfect candidates for the status quo and safe, conventional pop music. This is the other reason why I say if you have a strong, even unreasonable dislike for whatever is mainstream but don't really know why, you might just be neurodivergent. Modern pop music by definition is popular and palatable, which means less risk-taking and therefore creativity, which caters to the neurotypical and tends to disgust the neurodivergent. But we're going to talk more about all of that later on in this video. Another thing to point out is just how influential hyper-individualism is in the United States and just how much we obsess and worship being different, even if that means hating whatever is trending for no real reason other than the fact that everyone likes it, which automatically makes it corny. This has roots in American culture, but also postmodernism and a mass skepticism of whatever is considered mainstream, which creates constant critique and backlash, often just for backlash sake. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it can be argued that America is the most individualist country ever, like in all of history, and we barely have a concept of community or conformity anymore like most other nations still do, which makes us far more likely to gravitate towards whatever is new, different, or which just rejects the mainstream so we can feel different. The US is basically the I'm not like other girls stereotype personified. A large part of the cultural disconnect happening today also has to do with just how much social media has radically reshaped society, and especially how popular culture has become so balkanized into specific algorithmic niches, meaning our perception of what is popular is a lot more personalized and warped than before, which brings us to the death of the monoculture.
I want my MTV.
Monoculture refers to crops and describes a single, usually genetically modified crop which is mass-produced for maximum profit. So monoculture in this context refers to a mass, widely shared culture that is singular in the sense that we are all aware of it and take part in it. For decades, marketing revolved around mass appeal. Campaigns were designed to reach the broadest audience possible, and success was often judged by how many people saw them. Over time, this approach evolved, but still focused on a few shared ideals and performances that dominated the cultural mainstream. That era, the age of monoculture, is over. Today, we live in a world defined by diversity and individualism. People don't engage with brands as a part of a crowd. They expect interactions that reflect their personal values, context, and aspirations. Personalization is more than just a nice to have today. Welcome to the era of unique identity. But before we get to where we are today, let's rewind a bit. To really understand what the monoculture used to be, we need to go back to when it was still dominant. Think of the virality of Justin Bieber and Twilight. How no matter if you liked, loved, or hated the two, you still knew almost everything about them and couldn't escape it.
You haven't seen anything, and so you see me at the Jersey Shore.
Think of Jersey Shore and Snooki, Britney Spears and Michael Jackson. The monoculture is the concept of cultural singularity and commonality. The idea that before the disruption of social media and algorithmic personalization, culture was more centralized and shared. You would walk into a classroom in 2008 and understand all the references your classmates were talking about without engaging with them directly or even liking the things they liked. One of the biggest examples of this monoculture and the decline of it would probably be the MTV VMAs.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
I remember just how much the VMAs used to be almost like a pop culture Super Bowl, where the whole family would sit around the TV, excitingly wondering what crazy thing was going to happen or waiting for their favorite artist to perform. We would then go to school the next day talking all about what Kanye said to Taylor or wondering how Lady Gaga didn't get sick from wearing that meat dress. Never once did we think when asking others, did they see it or will they understand the reference? It was just a different time and culture wasn't as personalized and niche as it is today. It's generally considered that sometime around 2009 to 2013, the VMAs began its decline and today have basically become irrelevant except for a few viral social media clips or performances here or there. But what happened between 2009 to 2013, you ask? Well, the touchscreen smartphone became widely adopted, and by the middle of the decade, social media and personalized algorithms took over. Gone were the days of a singular uniting culture where we could all find common ground, and in came online niches and hyper-personalization. But these changes also weren't as sudden or overnight as you might think. At first, algorithms were chronological and based around keeping followers connected, meaning everything you saw followed whatever you had missed in a clean, timeline-like manner. Then, something massively disruptive happened. The emerging tech giants of Silicon Valley switched their profit model to what most media follows: advertising. This immediately shifted the profit incentive towards keeping users engaged at all costs because the more people who view the ads, the more the advertisers will pay. This led to the creation of something known as the attention economy. The concept of attention economy was first coined in the late 60s by Herbert Simon, characterizing the problem of information overload as an economic one. However, the concept has become increasingly popular with the rise of the internet, making content, the supply, increasingly abundant and immediately available, and attention, the new demand, becoming the limiting factor in the consumption of information. While the supply of accessible information has continued to grow rapidly, the demand for information is limited by the scarce attention we can give to it. So in other words, think of it like supply and demand. Supply being information and way too much of it, demand being our attention, which stays at a static, limited capacity. What this did was create an incentive for social media giants to figure out what keeps people the most engaged, and what they found was that human beings are still animals too. We may like to think we want to be surrounded by positivity and logic and reason, but what really gets us going is negativity, emotion, and outrage. This meant the more divisive, critical, or tribalistic something was online, the more likely it was to get engagement, eyeballs, and therefore profit. This is why I always say over and over, the world is not as negative as you are led to believe, and it's why I tell people, especially younger Gen Z who has never lived in a world without social media, that you are literally, consistently, as in every day, being manipulated and trolled by your algorithm in hopes of pissing you off for engagement. It knows just what to show you to annoy you and hopes that you'll either comment something out of anger and argue with someone, or keep scrolling because now you're annoyed and want dopamine relief from some meme. This outrage dopamine cycle is the business model. The world your feed creates is not as objective as you think and is quite literally built on getting an emotional response from you. So this is all to say that not only has social media destroyed the monoculture in favor of personalization, but also that their negativity-driven algorithms are changing how our brains literally work and making it harder and harder for us to enjoy anything. This is where what I said in the opening about you being the one who has changed and not the music comes in. If you are constantly consuming negative media and then opening the comments to see only negative, bullying-like posts with thousands of likes, the social acceptance desiring part of your brain, a lot of times subconsciously, will start to see these things also as undesirable. You will begin to think, well, if all these people hate something, then they must be right, and I don't want to feel othered, so I'm gonna agree too. So then is that the end of the video? Were we the baddies all along, and is modern culture good actually? Well, again, it's not that simple.
Are we the baddies?
While social media has many obvious downsides that I don't think are talked about nearly enough, there are still some genuine positives it has given us too. While it manipulates us, it also gives us the opportunity to become aware of that manipulation. It allows us to deconstruct the propaganda we've been fed for so long and create a space for such a sharing of information and ideas that who we were and how we previously viewed the world and culture have shifted dramatically in ways that I don't really think we sometimes recognize. This is why when we sometimes consume media from the early 2000s or just before the invention of social media, it can almost feel like propaganda. Like it's insulting our intelligence with the narratives or stereotypes it is so clearly pushing. Like the acting seems so corny and the supposed real life situations they're representing seem so out of touch and unrealistic. Because when we had a monoculture, we were a lot less critical of media and weren't really able to see through it as easily as we can now, meaning cultural standards were lower and it was easier to accept what we consumed without questioning it. With social media, we have an entire generation of people who are hyper aware of not just society and everything around them, but also themselves. Social media creates an environment of oversaturation and deconstruction, and coupled with those negativity-driven algorithms, whatever is the most critical or controversial or negative is probably going to rise to the top. So what we now have today is incredibly personalized social media that favors individualism over a shared monoculture, built upon negativity-driven algorithms that promote deconstruction and criticism, and that floods us with so much knowledge and information that we begin to see through previous inauthentic or propaganda-like narratives in culture and music. All these factors are coming together to exponentially raise our standards for the media we consume and crave genuine authenticity, when authenticity is defined as resonating with us personally, you and I, the singular individual. The shift from monoculture to personalization isn't just about marketing mechanics. It reflects a deeper societal evolution. Technological progress, social media, and global connectivity have empowered individuals to curate their own experiences and filter out anything that doesn't resonate. This transformation has created a new kind of audience, one that is aware, selective, and highly attuned to authenticity. People expect brands to understand them, not in a superficial, segmented way, but in a way that mirrors the nuanced complexity of their lives. Whether they're choosing a product, reading a piece of content, or evaluating a service, modern consumers are asking, is this for me? If the answer feels like no, they move on quickly. This is also why I always say I think the age of the mega, godlike celebrity is on its way out, and that probably Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or Lady Gaga are the last of them. In order to have an artist be able to reach such a status, you need a monoculture, some level of mystique, in a world without social media, because social media creates far too much oversaturation, which destroys our ability to see celebrities as do no wrong deities, and the personalization makes it so that an artist you may perceive as huge is just because your algorithm and is not as reflective of reality or those around you in general. This is why it can be so common for younger Gen Z or Gen Alpha to have such culture shocks when talking to people in the real world. They don't yet understand that the artificial reality their algorithm constructs is specifically catering to them, and that just because all they see are Charlie XCX posts with millions of likes, that doesn't mean someone down the street is even aware of who she is. This would be nearly impossible in the previous monoculture. While your neighbor may not have known much about Lady Gaga, they would have still known who she was in some way and understood her cultural influence, unless they were like 80 and didn't watch TV or never listened to the radio. For some people, they may only see Lana Del Rey and Ethel Cain on TikTok. Others, Benson, Boone, and Sabrina Carpenter. Some, Addison Rae and Charlie XCX. But what they will all have in common is the warped perception that a lot more people also see what they do instead of a hyper-personalized, simulated-like reality for engagement. We can see just how much labels desperately keep trying to recreate previous megastars like Tate McRae or Addison Rae, only for them to get relentlessly torn apart on social media for various reasons, with one of the biggest being oversaturation and that new hyper-awareness we all have of inauthenticity and manufactured personas for profit. Corporations can't just keep reheating people's nachos and avoiding all creative risk because the data analyzing algorithm told them it would work, but they don't want to listen. This is all the result of something we have been deeply entrenched in for decades, the neoliberal era, which brings us to the scariest part of this video, Ronald Reagan and neoliberalism.
How are you seeing the whole business, the entertainment business, changing over that period?
It's changed so drastically and very quickly. You know, the kind of films that I really started my career doing. I remember Sidney Pollack, the director of Tootsie, saying to me, these middle films, that aren't like huge, expensive blockbusters or tiny independent films. He said, this road is going to be closed soon. These aren't going to exist anymore, and he was right.
In this interview, Jessica Lange touches on a very interesting point about media that I think can also be expanded upon and applied to music and culture in general as well. Back then, it's generally believed that movies and music were better and more diverse, and it had everything to do with regulation and politics. Put briefly, before the mass deregulation of the 80s and 90s, directors and producers had more opportunities to take risks, experiment, try things out, and innovate. Fewer monopolies and corporate consolidations existed at this time, which made the playing field a bit more equitable and allowed for better competition and a diversity of culture. When you have less wealth and equality, those at the bottom have a better chance to rise up, and when we are focusing on art and music and media, that means the average person, musician, or filmmaker wasn't competing with some giant like Disney or Sony. This made art more diverse and representative of a wider range of styles or sounds. With the neoliberal deregulation of the 80s and 90s, corporations began to do what they always do when given the chance. Consolidate and consume until there is no competition left, and once the competition is gone, you don't really have to entice consumers to watch your movies or listen to your music anymore because now they have no choice, which also means the quality goes down and price goes up. This roughly explains what many call the end goal of capitalism, and it's something you'll understand if you've ever played the game Monopoly. But what in the hell is neoliberalism? Well, to briefly summarize, neoliberalism was an economic policy of government bad and too big, rich people and corporations good and too small. It was a mass deregulation of markets, privatization of everything, defunding of public services, hyper-individualism and personal responsibility, and a broader focus on financialization and shareholder-driven profit models. It technically began implementation with Carter in the 70s, but was really accelerated with Reagan in the 80s and solidified by Clinton in the 90s. What predated neoliberalism was something known as New Deal economics or Keynesian economics, which was started by FDR in response to the Great Depression and focused more on government necessary to regulate markets so rich people don't take over and cause another Great Depression. It favored government market intervention, heavy regulation to protect consumers, workers, and avoid depressions, trust busting so that monopolies can't form, high taxes on the rich, public services to lower inequality and poverty, and an emphasis on community, workers' rights, and unions. The reason this is all relevant is because we are living nearly 50 years down the road of mass deregulation, and what has happened in response is an incredible consolidation of wealth that is only really comparable to the first American Gilded Age.
1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth.
This affects art because when wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of only a few, competition begins to disappear and the quality of the products, or in this case, art and media we consume, begins to degrade. This specific point, neoliberal economics, is one of the biggest reasons art, music, and movies are so shitty and artificially manufactured today. Remember, the shareholder profit incentive basically means that numbers are all that matter. It means that quality is nothing, and when it comes to art, authenticity or creativity not only become irrelevant, but are even completely avoided. Remember how I said regulation allowed for a diversity of media and art, which led to a flourishing of creativity and experimentation? Well, when the profit incentive shifts towards shareholders and numbers, now it's all about risk avoidance and whatever is the easiest path toward profit, which tends to be recreating past successes instead of trying something new and creative. This is why we have those endless remakes no one asked for, or why we keep seeing carefully manufactured industry plants blatantly modeled on previous singers. Those in power just want to make that stock number go higher, and they don't have time to allow creative risk, especially in a world where the monoculture is gone and their previous success models aren't really reliable. Now, I know this all might sound a bit abstract or hard to really grasp, but to put it bluntly, the goals and origins of art couldn't be more different than that of capitalism, which creates this natural clash or disconnect. Art is about expression and emotion. It's abstract and unpredictable, and it's born from innovation and creativity without a single thought on whether other people will like it. And if they do, great. If they don't, that's fine too, because the goal isn't mass appeal for profit, it's authentic expression. It's not about catering to the masses, it's about trying something out and seeing how it makes you feel and if it accurately expresses your own inner world. This is something that is incredibly difficult to commodify in a predictable way. Capitalism is about profit and commodification. It is quite simply the accumulation of capital, and while it can spur technological innovation, that doesn't apply to the arts. Capitalism needs regularity and predictability to ensure profit, which stifles creativity and waters art down to be as palatable and accessible as possible. It doesn't want to hear about abstraction and personal emotions or expression. It wants something solid, generic, and reproducible, which brings us to where we are today. It's why so much of the mainstream music and aesthetics now seem so performative or even strangely unsettling, like we are all living in an artificial capitalistic dystopian film. It's because art, created solely for profit, seeks to emulate authenticity and creativity, but due to the risk avoidance, maximize profit with as little effort as possible values it's built on, it instead creates something so artificial it feels uncanny and obviously unnatural. We can see this occurring right now with the debate surrounding Addison Rae and her recent rebrand.
To me, Addison Rae feels algorithmic. It feels like she took a bunch of Gen Z subcultures, internet culture, gay music icons, put them in some sort of machine and put out a pop star. She's perfectly curated, everything in her niche touches every perfect little point. Everything is intentional and thought of beforehand. Intentional coolness is not coolness. It can be fun, it can be a performance, but I don't think it's cool. Coolness is not something that's born from performing, because to perform, to have people like what you do, you have to be palatable enough for everyone else. The coolest person in the room is usually the person who's starting the trends before everyone else does it. They're the person who's thinking of something no one else does. They're the person who sees the world in a unique way and creates. Their entire output is stuff in that very unique viewpoint.
Some compare her to a modern Britney Spears. Others see through it and find it so artificial that it's almost insulting. What I mean by this is the marketing and manufacturing of artists is becoming so blatant that it feels like they think we're all fools and can't tell authenticity from an industry plan. It feels like they aren't even trying to hide it anymore, and what's worse, it seems that some people don't even care because they either can't tell because they're used to it, or they just want music that sounds like the 2000s. Even though I don't think Addison Rae is anywhere near Britney Spears, I do think we can learn something from comparing the two. Again, while they are separate artists from different times and backgrounds, they actually kind of have a similar path to success. Britney Spears' career started young on the Mickey Mouse Club, a show made for children and teens in the 90s. When she was in her late teens, producers saw her potential and began the careful process of manufacturing and grooming her for worldwide success. This doesn't mean that Britney Spears wasn't talented, by the way, just that she didn't just pop out onto the scene fully formed. She had a team behind her who saw her potential long before she reached it and who optimized her existing talents to appeal to a larger mainstream audience. Because a monoculture still existed during her debut, results were more predictable, people were less critical of what they consumed, and Britney Spears took off, reaching a level of fame comparable to Madonna or Michael Jackson. Now, I know Britney Spears received an incredible amount of hate and especially misogyny during her career and towards the end, but when I say people weren't as critical, I mean people didn't flat out reject her from the start, which would have stopped her career before it could even begin. Addison Rae started from more grassroots beginnings as well, dancing on TikTok and gaining a massive following, which was then noticed by producers who signed her and began the process of manufacturing and grooming her for mainstream success. What label executives may not have understood though is that in the age of social media and personalization, if you're massively popular, you're probably also massively disliked, especially if you're a woman. Coupled with the fracturing of the monoculture, negativity-based culture, and the previous business model doesn't seem to be holding up as well. Addison's music and entire persona today are basically debated. Some like her and think she's refreshing, some like her but know it's inauthentic and don't care. Others dislike her because they see her as so inauthentic. I think if we were somehow able to take Addison and transport her to the Mickey Mouse Club and give her the same opportunities as someone like Britney Spears, she would have had much greater chances, and if they put as much effort into her image then as they are now, I think her success would be more guaranteed than debated. While it can be argued that Britney Spears was more talented and charismatic and she had the it factor than Addison, and that's why she succeeded in all the ways she did, I still think the similarities they share and radically different outcomes they received perfectly captured the thesis for this video. Our collective standards for the culture we consume are far higher and contrarian than before, and just because something is enjoyed by some doesn't mean it will be enjoyed by all anymore. Culture has become too fragmented, the artificial corporate manufacturing too obvious, and our collective standards for what we choose to consume too high. While the most efficient route to mainstream visibility and therefore opportunity is now social media, the bigger you get on it, the more exposed, criticized, and hated you will probably be, which can limit future growth and mainstream success. With a mass consolidation of wealth and influence, you will also probably be completely controlled and manufactured in the name of palatability and easy profit, which makes you even more likely to be seen as artificial and therefore disliked in an era where we all crave authenticity, with our definitions of what is even considered authentic becoming more personalized and individual. But one thing I did want to come back to was what that previous TikToker said about Addison Rae's current aesthetic.
To me, Addison Rae feels algorithmic.
I think her point about the unnatural perfectibility of artists today is really interesting, and again, has to do with risk avoidance and algorithmic personalization. What social media and data collection have done is give corporations access to unfathomable amounts of data, which they can then analyze and in real time see what is trending and then predict what will succeed based on past outcomes instead of taking a chance based on creative innovation and human speculation. The artists of the past were given more creative control and were therefore able to set trends and innovate culture. If Elvis, MJ, Madonna, Prince, or Lady Gaga weren't allowed to take creative risks and forced to be modeled on previous successes, they wouldn't have been so groundbreaking and probably wouldn't have even had the iconic careers they did at all. What we get instead today are factory-made, highly artificial, highly safe to appeal to as many people as possible, heavily modeled on previous successful performers, artists. This lack of creative control and risk-taking is where we can get a glimpse of where this is all headed. Some of you may have seen this ChatGPT meme circulating around TikTok and Instagram lately. The meme is an ironic, hyperbolic statement on just how much people are relying on ChatGPT, with the joke being that they can't even accomplish simple tasks without first getting its input. Now, I know it's a joke, but like the saying goes, some jokes are just the truth, but being told in a safe, non-accountable way, and I think the popularity of this meme can actually tell us something bigger about choice, free will, and the future of AI. Like we just talked about with how everything feels like an artificial remake of something previous, and it being the result of corporations analyzing trends while relying on algorithms instead of human speculation and risk-taking, you might be surprised to realize that this isn't just affecting art or music or the corporate executives, but also the average person. As AI becomes more advanced and personalized, people will continue to rely on it for everything that they previously would have had to do themselves. We can already see this again not just with our art or artificially manufactured aesthetics and personas, but with students today and just how much they use ChatGPT for their work. We can see this in another unsettling meme that talks about how kids today can't believe that just something like a decade ago, people had to actually sit down and write a paper without AI. It's gotten so bad that MIT even did a study that found that ChatGPT is harming people's ability to think independently or use their critical thinking skills. The MIT study divided 54 subjects, 18 to 39-year-olds from the Boston area, into 3 groups and asked them to write several SAT essays using OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's search engine, and nothing at all, respectively. Researchers used an EEG to record the writers' brain activity across 32 regions and found that of the 3 groups, ChatGPT users had the lowest brain engagement and, quote, consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. Over the course of several months, ChatGPT users got lazier with each subsequent essay, often resorting to copy and paste by the end of the study. The group that wrote essays using ChatGPT all delivered extremely similar essays that lacked original thought, relying on the same expressions and ideas. 2 English teachers who assessed the essays called them largely soulless. The EEGs revealed low executive control and attentional engagement. And by their 3rd essay, many of the writers simply gave the prompt to ChatGPT and had it do almost all of the work. The brain-only group, conversely, showed the highest neural connectivity, especially in alpha, theta, and delta bands, which are associated with creativity, ideation, memory load, and semantic processing. Researchers found this group was more engaged and curious and claimed ownership and expressed higher satisfaction with their essays. Now, it is important to point out that this study was done on a very small test group and also hasn't been peer-reviewed yet, but I think these results wouldn't shock anyone. What we are seeing today is super powerful AI-based algorithms that are beginning to usurp control over our own decision-making abilities, except we're choosing to allow it. If you take where we are right now, with predictive algorithms dictating art and destroying creative risk-taking, and people offloading their ability to perform any task that requires critical thinking, and then extrapolate it out to see where we're headed, what you find is a dystopian-like future. Art, music, and creativity become entirely AI-generated and dictated by an algorithm. If the super powerful bot tells you it won't succeed, or more likely, won't get likes or sell, you don't try it. Risk-taking, and therefore creativity, begin to die out. What previously made us human, diversity of opinions, personalities, spontaneity, the ability to take risks and think outside of the box, becomes a rarity, with everyday choices being strictly dictated by what the almighty bot tells you is true and what choices you should make. Now, I know this may sound weird because even though AI today is very powerful, it still makes a lot of mistakes and often hallucinates, but just imagine where it will be in something like 5 to 10 years. If artificial general intelligence is proven to be possible, that will literally change everything. Imagine an AI more powerful, faster, and smarter than every single human put together on Earth. Imagine the conversations you could have with something that has read and analyzed all of human knowledge collected in the past 10,000 years.
It's a place that's not of the physical world. It's where everything else is that I didn't even know existed.
It would also know everything about you in ways that you couldn't even comprehend, so why wouldn't we expect people to trust it? What type of unimaginable insights could it offer? How would this type of superintelligence affect our ability to trust our own decisions and intellect? If transhumanism also ends up being possible and we physically hook our bodies and minds up to these machines, they would then know us on the biological and chemical level. In real time, it would be able to analyze our moods, thoughts, what ticks us off, our deepest desires, fears, the unique neurochemical makeup of our brains, and it would genuinely know us in ways that can be hard to fathom today. It would be able to tell us things about ourselves that we could never be aware of or wouldn't even want to believe, but that it has the physical data to prove. With this amount of data analysis, it's easy to see how people would start to trust the AI over their own decisions. What I am describing is the death of individuality and possibly even free will itself. When you also factor in human culture and religion and just how much we seek to believe in something bigger, more powerful, all-knowing, and in control of everything, it then almost looks like we're building the God we've been chasing for thousands of years, who is supposed to be the one who built us. What we see through all of human history is a constant desire to put trust in something bigger than ourselves. From trusting our religions and gods, to leaders and experts, to now AI and algorithms. But what we can also see throughout history is what a naive, childlike trust in something can also lead to. Whether it be the atrocities committed by those who claim to represent our gods, the lies from those who claim to be our leaders, or the horrors caused by the technology that promised us utopia. Blind faith often ends in crystal clear disaster. In this way, I think it's important to point out that AI is not God, it is not infallible, and I think just like with what the sinking of the Titanic or the war crimes of World War II taught us, it will end up being used in ways that are horrific beyond comprehension.
But this ship can't sink. She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will.
Okay, so I know I went off of a bit of a philosophical deep end there, but I'm sure you're probably wondering, what does this all have to do with art again? Well, while I know everyone is terrified of how AI will take over everything, especially art, I think that ironically, art and music and culture is where the silver lining to all of this can be found. Just like a machine can build a car faster than a human, algorithms might be better at analyzing data, taking someone's order at a restaurant, understanding and performing business interactions, but what it can never do is authentically express the human experience. Art is the first human invention, and it will be the last one standing, even if AI takes over everything. This is because art is born from the expression of human experience, and AI will never be able to share in that. Art and culture were created to help us make sense of and reclaim our experiences in this mind, in this body, and on this planet, and that is what makes it so unique. It is not something born from algorithms or data, but from abstract experience in humanity. This obviously doesn't mean that AI can't or won't create art. We see it all the time already, and in fact, I'm sure it will even create good art that will be enjoyed by lots of people. It's just that AI art will always be something other than actual human art. Again, it's not born from the abstract crevices of some human mind, and that will always limit it in ways that will not apply to human-made art. We don't just enjoy art because of how it sounds, how it looks, or how it makes us feel. We also appreciate what it means and what inner, metaphysical, human experience inspired it. Something made by an AI may be impressive at first glance, but with the knowledge of its artificiality, that value is instantly diminished. So this is all to say, yes, art and music and even culture in general are becoming more artificial, performative, and algorithmic based, but that also creates something a lot of people may have missed: a new, insatiable demand for human-made, authentic content. Just like with the attention economy and the overabundant supply of data but limited human attention, AI-generated content grows exponentially while human-made content stays relatively constant. This creates a massive demand and new value to human-made anything. We have never lived in a time more hungry for authenticity and creative human imperfection. As our reality and world continue to become more AI-generated, automated, and artificially perfected, the imperfections, quirks, creativity, and inherent uniqueness of the human experience will be more sought out and valuable than ever before.